All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Society of Play MicroTalks. We're going to be hosting quite a few really awesome local game developers, and they're going to be given little rants about what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, a bunch of other stuff. But before we dive into the talks, we just have a few announcements for Society of Play. First off, we're Society of Play. We're a nonprofit game development organization. We're for AAA, indie, hobbyist, whatever, just people that make games. We're based out of Dallas, but we're for anyone, anywhere. Right now, we're all digital, thanks to COVID. But yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, come join our Discord. Yep, join our Discord. We also have a new website, societyofplay.net or dallassocietyofplay.org. I don't know which one's our main domain yet, but they're both out there. If you want to join the Discord, you can go there. If you're watching on YouTube, it's fine. We're going to be streaming through YouTube, and then after this stream, we're going to be joining the Discord, and we're all going to be hanging out in one of the voice chats. So if you want to hang out and talk and ask questions, we're going to be doing Q&A after the fact, not right now. If you are a part of our Discord, Storm has a request for you.
Yes, for those of you rich boys and girls who have Discord Nitro, there's a little thing you can do to help the community a lot. You can boost the server. You believe you have two. We don't ask for all of them, but if you have any to spare, that'd be great. It helps give us more emojis, which is always good for community engagement. But most importantly, it will give us 1080 60 frames per second streaming, which is good for our weekly events and also for this stream as we're restreaming people's talks in Discord. So it's a combination of a good thing to have, but also technically an accomplishment for us. So I would appreciate any and all Discord Nitro boosts if you have them.
If you have any complaints about how the stream looks, this will help us make the stream look better. Please and thank you. Also, for this Halloween, we do it every single year. For October, we're doing spooky Discord names. For Discord, we usually have a really strict policy of asking everyone putting in their actual name that they go by, just so that we can build actual relationships and people get to know each other. But our tried and true October tradition is that everyone does dumb, spooky names. Make it a pun on your actual name and just splice in some dumb, spooky words. It's what we do every year. Just go for it. It's fun. Everyone's doing it. All the cool kids are. But yeah. We're also announcing our next game jam. We are doing the Revival Jam. Every single October, we do a spooky game jam. And for this one, we're doing a game jam called Revival. The itch page is up right now. We'll be posting links to it after this talk. But as you can see, nobody can escape it, not even your old scrapped projects. And what we're doing is that we're actually asking everyone for this game jam over 2 weekends to take an old idea that you have that you either did not finish, maybe you got close to the finish line, it didn't build, or maybe you just have an old idea that you've never gotten around to developing, but you take an old game idea and develop that. So although if you want to put a spin on it and do something new, go for it, but we're really encouraging people to find old ideas of theirs and trudge them up as necromancers from the grave. So that'll be from October 15th to the 25th. We'll be doing a wrap-up event on the 29th, and the winners will be announced on Halloween. Although we're not doing an official event on Halloween, if you guys are like most of us, you're going to be locked in doing nothing on Halloween, and you are totally welcome to come hang out and chill in the Discord on Halloween to celebrate the winners and everyone that created abominations from the grave. We're also not totally sure how we want to judge things. We are doing it judged. We have a few ideas on what we want to do for themes or like judging criteria, but if you have any ideas for what we should do for criteria, join the Discord and just post what you think they should be. As of right now, we're doing actually scary, cute, spooky, fun, engaging, eldritch power, and pumpkin spice. We don't really know what 2 of those mean, but I think it's fun and people can kind of interpret what the heck those mean for people's games. But I'm excited to see who wins the pumpkin spice category, personally. Anyways, that's enough for introductions. We're going to dive into our actual MicroTalks. Thank you for listening to me rant. Got a bunch of cool talks. I'm not going to go over everyone's names right now, but starting off, we're going to be starting with Matt Rainwater giving their talk, Games as a Series of Meaningful Choices.
All right. So I'm good to go?
Yep, go for it.
All right. So thank you and welcome Society of Play for joining us. I'm going to give a talk on game design called Games as a Series of Meaningful Decisions. About me real quick, my name is Matt Rainwater. I've been a developer for about 8 years and a game dev for about 12 as a hobbyist. But I've been interested in game design for pretty much my whole life. Right now I'm working on my own game, Radical Hearts. It's a decision-heavy, turn-based RPG, and kind of developing that made me think about this topic a lot. So that's why I wanted to give this talk. And before we start, I have to give some definitions so that we kind of have a better understanding of what this is going to be about. First off, we have decision. This is a choice given to the player that allows them to influence the progress in the game. We have meaningful. This is the player has agency in why they chose an answer to a decision. There are various ways to give players that agency. And then lastly, I have to give a definition of game. This is not like a universal dogmatic definition. This is just for the purposes of this talk. And this is a system of enforced rules that constrain the player's choices, and it must contain intentional end states, good or bad, that the player's choices influences. So next up, let's stop on types of decisions. So we have hollow decisions. These are decisions that have no impact and don't really change the state of the game. Best example of this is if you ever played a JRPG where a character asks you, hey, do you want to save the princess? And you say yes, and the story continues. And you say no, and he just asks you again. And he keeps doing that until you say yes. Decisions have varying levels of information, uninformed, informed, or overinformed. Players can go in with the right amount of information, they can go in blind, or they can go in with a blinding amount of information. There's dramatic decisions. These are narrative, story, emotional decisions. This talk's not really about those. This is more about mechanical decisions, but I did want to call out dramatic decisions because they are very important for certain games. Decisions can be weighted, which means they're balanced options. No option is kind of strictly better than another. And decisions can have different timing. They can either be immediate or long-term. So either the state of the game has changed immediately when you make the choice, or later after some other choices, the original choice comes back and has an effect on the state of the game. And lastly, obvious. This is where you have many choices, but only one of them is the right choice. And for no related reason, Squirtle's going to show up. So this is a quick little game diagram of a flowchart of any kind of game, basically. And the way it works is, you start with information, which is information provided to the player. They make choices. Those choices lead to results, which lead right back to information. And that continues until you reach some sort of end state. And now let's look at these kind of individual parts. So first off, information. This is the current state of the game. So this is enemy positions, your HP total, your gold total, points or score, anything that's just kind of like a part of the model or state. Information can be known, which is it's readily available and presented to the user, usually in a UI or a HUD or a pop-up or something like that. It can be secret, which is a deliberate design decision to not give them information, to introduce uncertainty or risk. It's a way of adding some skill, possibly, of saying, okay, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be within these parameters. Or it can be determinable, which is it's available to the user, but it might require calculation, memory, or some other skill to determine. This is very useful for competitive games where you want to actually have people do better if they're more skilled. The person who's more able to either more accurately or more quickly determine the information they're in, odds are they're going to be more skilled and win more. Choices. Well, you need at least two choices, otherwise it's not much of a decision. And you can think of these as maps from one state to another. So if you have two choices, CA, CB, and they're in player state A, CA maps to A prime, CB maps to A double prime. That's just kind of a formalistic, mathy way of looking at it, but really it's just think of it as a map from one state to another. If you give too many choices or too little information or too much information, you can lead to the phenomenon known as analysis paralysis. If you've ever played board games, you've probably seen this. This is where some player, his turn takes forever because he can't figure out what to do. Either he has too many choices and he can't keep them all in his head, he has too little information and he can't make an informed decision, or he has too much information and he can't process it all to make the right choice. And last off, we have results. This is the end state of a given choice and the start point of the next choice. It can be probabilistic, which is a card draw or a die roll, something random, or deterministic, non-random, and what you see is what you get. The only real difference between a result and information, because they're basically the same thing, right? Information leads to choices, choices lead to results, results is information for the next choices. is that results can be an end state. So really, this is kind of like you can almost think of this as a subclass of information with the possibility of it being an end state. Next up, let's talk about meaningless decisions and what to do about them. So what types are they? Are they hollow? If you have a hollow decision, best option, probably just get rid of them. Only leave the valuable decisions remaining. Is it obvious? Well, you can try to make the other ones more meaningful. This is a harder approach. It requires playtesting and resources, but will probably lead to a better game, and you can replace the bad choices with good choices. Now I want to talk about this first turn question. So in board game design, when you start playtesting a game, something you want to keep an eye out for is what players do on the first turn. If every turn, regardless of player or player skill, ends up being very similar, something you can do is you take those first turns and you roll them to the setup, and you effectively make the second turn the first turn. This kind of gets rid of a lot of hollow, obvious decisions right off the bat. And then lastly, you can actually keep these. Meaningful decisions, when they're really intense and one right after the other, can be very exhausting. And so sometimes you might want to have some easy decisions in there to kind of give your player a break. So they're not necessarily bad, but definitely keep an eye on the intensity of the game as you make it. Next, let's do some case studies. So this is a board game called Food Chain Magnet. It's a very decision-heavy, very heavy game. And one of the mechanics in it are called milestones. So these are tasks that you can complete that give you bonuses. But if you don't complete a milestone and someone else does, you lose access to those milestones. This is a very long-term, informed, weighted decision. You know everything. There's no random chances. You have to take action now to accomplish these, but you might not get benefits till later. And they're all kind of balanced around each other. And so this is a great skill gate for figuring out who's the better player and who will end up winning. Next, we have too many JRPGs to mention. So this is for the JRPGs where you have random encounters with weak enemies that you don't want to spend resources on, whether that's in-game resources or mental energy or whatever. And so what do? You just mash fight or attack or whatever they call it until all the monsters are dead. The takeaway here is you should probably not have these. Just remove them, which is what I'm doing with my game, or alternatively, make them harder. So some games take that approach. If you've ever played a Shin Megami Tensei game, they're JRPGs, but every fight can kill you. It's also kind of the Dark Souls approach. Even the lowly skeleton can kill you. That's one approach. One thing to keep in mind there, obviously, is that that's going to be very exhausting to a player. Sometimes you want that. That's kind of what the Dark Souls games are famous for. The takeaway there is, just either get rid of them or make them actually matter. Next up is a recent game called Monster Train. It is a roguelike deck builder game. And every now and then you're given a choice between which of two train tracks to take. And each track has different bonuses and rewards, and you're trying to weigh which ones you want now that can help you or might help you later on. So it's a really interesting way to present this choice, is why I brought it up here. It's because it's literally just two train tracks. It's practically, it's sort of the trolley problem. And so the takeaway here is that the simple, clear choice can have a huge impact and also just look really visually appealing. And then the last one I want to talk about is stale metas. So if you've ever played any competitive multiplayer games, there's this idea of the metagame, the game outside the game. In Magic the Gathering, the primary metagame is deciding which deck to bring to a tournament. Right now, this is a very recent tournament result, and as you can see, everyone chose the same deck. This causes massive player dissatisfaction. It's a very obvious choice. Nobody's really happy about this. And everybody knows to do it. As soon as you see these results, you know that everybody's going to be playing the same deck, which is just going to cause a miserable play experience that isn't going to end well. The takeaway here is fixing this requires playtesting and getting feedback from your users. Magic's kind of taking the opposite approach, where they release it first and then get playtesting. But it's important to keep this in mind to try to avoid some of these obvious choices do some extensive playtesting, and get some real feedback from your players. And that's the end of my talk. I will be in the voice chat later if anybody has any questions.
Hey, thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it.
I just realized I was muted on the stream on YouTube. So I'm going to say that again really quick. Thank you. Sorry for the silence. This is Travis talking about solar coasters.
Awesome. Okay, I'm sharing my screen now. So Tyler, you can pass that over. Hey guys, so MicroTalk, I'm going to be really quick kind of going through this very high level approach. And I really encourage you to touch base with me afterwards. So visual effects is an area that is often seen and felt. Is often felt, but not seen. And we really are the wizards of the video game development. So this is just to kind of show you some ideas of how you can kind of up your games with some visually appealing things. So solar coasters. Before we get started, I want to mention my name is Travis McCallum, and I am a VFX artist currently volunteering at Black Eye Studios. I also run the podcast for the real-time visual effects community. So if you want to learn or get involved in the field, definitely touch base with me. There's so much need and demand for visual effects artists right now. So this is my agenda. We're going to talk about what are solar coasters, and we'll break down the different elements to create your own solar coaster today. So what are solar coasters? If you've ever been to an amusement park, you've seen what a roller coaster is. It's this ride that you get on, you get in a cart, and then you drive around and you do loop-de-loops, and you go in circles, and you just spin all over the place. This is exactly the same idea when we talk about solar coasters, because in VFX, in visual effects, there's what we have this raw energy or matter that makes up the world. And it's our job as artists to manipulate and control the momentum and direction of that energy. So this is a technique where you can customize the path of how you want your energy to flow throughout the games that you play. And I can't take credit for this. My good friend Russell Bakewell over at Blizzard Entertainment came up with this, so kudos to him. So a couple examples of solar coasters in action in games. You can see how the flow can kind of go up here, and it can be from like a point A to point B kind of direction. But solar coasters can also be continuous, and they can highlight certain areas within the field as well. So the use of solar coasters is very versatile. But the one thing you'll notice in all these examples I'm showing is that solar coasters are one part of a much bigger picture. In this example, we're looking at them as a burst, where it's just kind of like a boof, but it's so quick, you hardly get to notice it. So how do we create a solar coaster, right? It starts by creating the shape. And you can jump into any 3D modeling program. For purposes today, I'm just going to show you what it looks like in Blender, and I'll make this really quick. So when you're thinking about the shape, it's really as simple as creating a simple plane and manipulating it however you want. I like to take the Bezier curve and just grab different pieces of it and extrude it, extrude it, extrude it, extrude it. And after that, you've got this cool looking shape here. You can even move them up on the Z-axis to get some more form and definition. But if you come over here to the Bezier part and you select your curve, you can actually go to the geometry function and add a extrude. And then suddenly that curve has turned into an actual plane that you can use in the game. And the reason I'm showing you this technique is how we take it into the game engine. You can turn over here into convert to mesh. And the important thing when you're creating your solar coaster mesh is the UV map that comes from it. It comes out perfectly square and ready to use in the game. And if this doesn't make much sense right now, bear with me. We can go ahead and rotate it so it's vertically and we'll be able to scan our textures across it. And just how this example kind of shows right here, our texture is going to be the cart or the trolley in the roller coaster track that we're going to be taking. And it's going to be traveling from point A to point B through the road. And same thing here on the UVs as we kind of travel up through it. So this is an example of where the texture exists in 0 to 1 space within, say, a 512 by 512, PNG. And I'm using Unreal as an example. You can do the same thing in Unity or other game engines. And here's just 2 examples of different textures I use. The important thing is, whatever kind of texture you use, treat it like the object that you want to travel through the pathway you're making. And in this case, I'm going to take it along the vertical axis, so the V, and it's going to go from bottom to top, and it'll travel through there. You can also do it horizontally, but in this example, I'm not. The important thing here is make sure with the Y-axis tiling, you change this from wrapped to clamped. And that's important because if you keep it unwrapped, it's just going to go into an endless loop, and you're constantly going to see the texture just going on the merry-go-round. So looking into the shader itself, if you're familiar with the materials, we have this really well-known node called the texture coordinate. And it really is just a simple red and green mask that combine together. One going in the horizontal axis, which is the red, and then one going in the vertical axis, which is the green. If we end up taking those apart and we adjust just the green axis, we can have more control over how our texture pans within the mesh when we create it. And I know this is a little technical, guys, but I just wanted to show you some of the cool things that we can accomplish along with the back end here. To break this down really briefly, the red mask is completely untouched. We're not doing anything in the horizontal. It's just going to be pulled out and then put right back into the equation. But the green mask with the vertical, we're actually going to offset it with a panner node. In this case, we're just using a scalar to test it out. One of the reasons why I have this subtract node is because if we plugged the texture into the mesh right now, it would just appear. And we actually wanted to start off frame and go through the mesh and then out of frame again. So to illustrate that, let's take a look at this image right here. Here in the top left, we have the mesh that we created. And it's that plane that we made in Blender, and it just kind of travels along as the railroad tracks that we would see in our roller coaster. And you can see where the texture starts off at the left, and it goes through the space of the mesh as it travels from that 0 to 1 space. You can again see it over here on the right side as it travels from bottom to top as the V offset goes from 0 to 2. Really, really cool how you can do that. So to expand on this, now we want to translate it into real time, where we can actually use it in a particle system like we saw earlier. And this is just a few changes. We're going to take the scalar parameter and we'll plug in a dynamic parameter in place of that. And we'll just plug it in with the particle color so that we can control some of the colors and plug it into the emissive and opacity. But a big thing to note here is when you're setting up your shader, click two-sided. It'll give your mesh visibility from any angle that you're seeing it from. And that's really important whenever you're trying to construct these to be in 3D environments. Finally, if we jump over to Cascade, you can add that dynamic parameter to control the Soulercoaster movement and basically animate it over the lifetime of the particle by setting it up as the dynamic parameter. So you can come over here, click dynamic parameter, and make sure you're refreshing your dynamic parameter anytime you make a change to the material. Otherwise, this big box will not be reflecting what you would see in the material itself. I want to explain this part here in the bottom if you're your first time working with curves and any kind of like parameters in Cascade. The in values are the lifetime of the particle. So at 0, at the beginning of the particle lifetime, it's going to start out of frame at 2. And then at the end, it's going to start at 0, out of frame at 0. So that means at 1, the texture that we showed, the zoomy, is going to be completely filling that entire mesh in one go. So here's just a couple more examples really briefly of what we ended up creating with this. And you can see it's so versatile, so personable, how you can easily change the color, the timing, and all kinds of other things with it as well. In the first two examples on the left, it's drawing in energy. And then on the right side, it's pushing energy out. So when you think about visual effects in the world of Soulercoasters, think of it as energy flowing through the level. And just for fun, I just want to show you a little effect that I've been working on, just to kind of showcase how you can really use the Soulercoaster in your effect. In this case, it's kind of like a flare, kind of charging up power, and then firing out this big blast. All right, that's all I have to show.
Let me remember to unmute myself this time. Awesome, thank you. Soulercoasters are rad, and it's a cool word. At this point, though, we're going to be moving on a little bit away from design or more technical conversations into what is, I would assume from the title, of being punched in the face, or the educational value of it. We're definitely shifting into the territory of rants, but I'm excited. Yeah, so Edward, the floor is yours.
Let me unmute my mic, and hopefully this doesn't look terrible. Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Newton, and today I'm going to be talking about the surprising benefits of getting punched in the face. This talk is going to cover three things: how I used to avoid getting punched in the face for a super long time, what happened when I got punched in the face, and then what I learned from being punched in the face every day for months. Part one, who the hell am I? This is me. I've been working in the entertainment business for about 10 years. Some highlights. At 26, I started a science fiction web series called Stranger Things. Not the Netflix series. You know that's true because I have the Twitter handle and they have an underscore. The show did okay. This is me at a fan event telling the crowd that we had been picked up for on-demand distribution to 25 million homes across America. At 29, I moved to Los Angeles to be a writer-director. It was really hard, but really, really fun. I did a lot of work as a video editor. This is some of my work. I wrote a script, which got me a manager, and also an option, and also some attention from seriously major players. How major are they, you ask? Major enough that I don't want to piss them off by dropping their names here. That same script won me the attention of a very beautiful, very talented someone who eventually became my girlfriend. I produced some TV, but things got really fun when I started working on YouTube. Now, you might have seen some of my work. For a while, I led the editing team for The Game Theorists, and in 2017, we won the Streamy for Best Editing. Now, between my work for them and work for others, the view count for my editing work is around 330 million views. But I only led The Game Theorist for about a year. My girlfriend and I had started a YouTube channel together, and when she became my fiance, we decided to work full-time on our channel. So between our Patreon and our 250,000 subscribers, we were able to make it a full-time job. So, okay. That's the Instagram version. Let me tell you the inside of the diary. For as long as I could remember, creativity hurt. Sitting down to create something was a frustrating, painful process of over-analysis. I would tear things up, or I'd second-guess myself, or I'd abandon just everything I started. It was like trying to pass a mental kidney stone. But when I worked on other people's projects, it was smooth. It was still challenging, but it didn't have that spiky, pulling teeth feeling. To give you an idea, this is just the same slide, pardon me. To give you an idea, when I was doing my series, over the course of about 2.5 years, I did 5 episodes. In the same period working with my fiance and then later my wife, I made about over 100. And this repeated itself over and over and over again. When a client of mine was trying to start a TV show, I pitched a fix to them in about 45 minutes, and I ended up getting hired to run the show. When my manager asked me to pitch any TV show I wanted to these producers, I could do whatever I wanted, I choked. I did not come up with anything. I couldn't come up with anything that I felt was good enough to send to them. Now, when the TV show that I did do ended up being a success, and my employer said, "Hey, come up with a second show that's similar, anything you want," I also choked. I did not want to find out that I wasn't good. I did not want to get punched in the face. And for a long time, it seemed like it was working. Like my career was awesome, and my marriage was awesome, and I was reaching hundreds of thousands of people, and it was great. And then I got punched in the face. Part 2, getting punched in the face. At the end of 2018, I lost both my marriage and the company we created. And the fine print, the separation was mutual, and she's doing a good job running the channel. I still recommend the channel to people, but I'm not going to mention it here. So, now I'm alone in my newly empty house. I'm suddenly single, without the career I'd spent years building, and I found that I was too burned out on everything to even look for another entertainment job. That is not part of this talk, by the way. Please see my forthcoming talk, The Considerable Advantages of Burning Yourself to a Charred Husk. That's later. So I'm alone, and I'm burnt out, and I needed a change. And that's when a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, we're looking for teachers to teach movie making to high schoolers in Dallas. Do you know anybody?" And that is how I came to Dallas. And the punching stopped, and I was so glad. And if the punches had really stopped there, I think nothing would have changed for me. But later, I would find out that that delay was actually the world just taking off its gloves. So let me tell you what it's like to be a first-year teacher. Imagine this, if you will. Get to work early. Teach 30 different kids every 90 minutes. Some of them are loud, some of them are bored, most of them don't care, a few of them desperately need your help. Write your lesson plan on your lunch break, but don't forget to plan extra stuff for the 12 kids who across 4 classes with specialized learning requirements. And as you try to hold the attention of a room of teenagers, try not to get too concerned about that one kid in the back who is actually really smart and very interested, but is having a hard time because they don't speak English and you don't speak Spanish. So, assign homework. Collect all the homework. Once a week, sit in a meeting where your supervisor tells you you're not getting enough done. And then they start listing all the other stuff that you haven't had a time to get to, all the things you've dropped. And in this person's office, you realize you are failing. You are failing in your personal life, in your professional life, and now it's not just you. Now there's 150 kids that don't even know how much you're failing them. You're failing, and there is nothing you can do to fix it. And there is no escaping. And you can't get upset in the office because they are looking at you and you are broke and 1,000 miles from being able to get another job doing what you're good at. And you feel this humiliation crawl up your neck now. And you try to remember what a reassuring smile looks like so that you can show you understand and that you'll try harder. And you do. You go home alone and you go to work and you try harder. You teach more classes. You work more hours. You attend more meetings. Still not enough. So you try harder. You cry in the parking lot, and it's still not enough. Which brings me to the whole thesis of this talk. Okay, admittedly, pay teachers more is not the thesis of this talk, but I am not a teacher anymore, so you know I actually mean that. The actual thesis of this talk. I had lived most of my life with an audience in my head. It felt dangerous not to try to analyze myself at every step to see whether people would like what I was doing. But when I started every day knowing I couldn't do everything I had to do, and there was no way to escape failure, thinking about how bad it would be made every waking minute miserable. So I did the only thing I could do. I stopped thinking about how much I was going to fail. If you get punched in the face enough times, you learn to keep your head down. And when that inner voice started to say, nobody's going to like that, I started saying, you're not helping, you're making it worse. And that is when I learned, yes, failure hurts, but it passes. Anticipating failure never ends. So here's some bonus DLC. How do I do that? Any teacher will tell you that the first year of teaching is just trying not to die. Like, I'm not a teacher anymore. It wasn't the right fit for me, but it taught me things that I couldn't learn anywhere else, and I would like to share those with you. First, accept that failure is part of the bargain. If you are not failing at some point, you are definitely doing it wrong. You are leaving good stuff on the table, and that good stuff might be the difference between I have a career and I quit. Now, if you're like me, there's a part of your brain that just said, oh yeah, sure, we're going to fail at first, but then we're going to get so good that we'll never have to fail again. No. Failure is inevitable, always. But you can influence how and when and where you will inevitably fail. And since failure is inevitable, position yourself to fail smart. Make sure that succeed or fail, your immediate future has this: enough to eat, a safe place to sleep, meaningful relationships with people you care about, and time for self-care, mental and physical. Now, does that mean you need to have savings in the bank, or you need to have a day job while you work on the game that you want to develop? Whatever it takes. Do not give the panicked part of yourself real ammunition, like, if this doesn't go well, we're going to get kicked out of our apartment. For me, this meant that I had to do this. I had to redefine being creative. Sitting down and starting was excruciating for me because I would tear everything apart in my head and say, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. And I think it's because I used to think that being creative meant I'm going to sit down and make a perfect thing now. And now I am beta testing a new way of thinking about creative work, which is I'm going to sit down for a predetermined period and turn off my analytical brain and see what happens. That's it. It's not a period of creative work. It's just a period of no judgment creativity wherein some work is created. Predetermined is critical. It cannot be too long because ignoring your inner critic takes energy. For example, just writing this talk, I was so anxious that I started deciding I would just write it in 15-minute bursts. And by this point in the talk, I think I was on my 6th or 7th. Saying I'll do 15 minutes is much easier than saying I'll do an hour and a half. And when the timer goes off right in the middle of a good idea, it's a built-in cliffhanger that's going to make you want to come back. But maybe none of this makes sense to you. Maybe you're like, what are you talking about? Which is why I have saved the best solution for last. AI is the solution to everything. Since this is a game developer talk, if you're not already convinced, I thought I should at least try to frame this in terms we can all understand. I'm assuming we all know how AI works, basically, right? Like, a computer runs millions of simulations, keeps what works, and then keeps going. What I'd like to offer to you is a philosophical reframing of why AI is so powerful and smart, and not a... AI is not naturally smart. We know that's not because we build it, stupid. It's faster than us for sure, but that's not better. AI is powerful specifically because it's faster than us at one thing: failing, salvaging what was good, and moving in a positive direction without slowing down. My friends, be as AI is. Know that worrying is worse than failing. Accept that failure is growth. Fail faster, fail better, and keep moving forward. Save yourself the punches to the head. Thank you.
Oh, that was great. And I gotta say, you hit exactly your time mark. So good
Oh,
job.
I'm so
That's
glad I
perfect.
cut so many things.
I wish I hadn't cut you off. But
Ah.
yes, that was great.
Wait, did you cut me off? Did you cut me off?
Oh, no, you're fine. No, it's been earlier.
Oh no, so somebody messaged me and said you're over time. I'm like, I'm so
Oh.
sorry, I cut it down.
You're fine. You're good.
Okay, there we go.
Anyways, moving on.
Yeah,
and
please
for
tell
everyone
me.
talking, I know everyone's, there's been great jokes. I've been laughing my butt off with my mic muted, but everyone's doing such a great job. I know it's tough performing to a silent audience, but you guys are doing a great job. Up next, we have Patrick I diving back into a more designery topic. The theater
Yes.
systems.
Real quick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, cool. So yeah, I am going to be talking about the tragic systems of Pathologic 2, a game that kind of feels like getting punched in the face a lot. So this is it's going to go over some minor spoilers, nothing big. So if you're interested in the game, I'm not going to spoil anything that will prevent you from playing it. And I really do recommend that everybody do. So it is a first-person survival RPG. You don't have to have played the first one. It's kind of unplayable by modern standards, but so you know what you're getting into. The mechanics are there are some dialogue choices. You have some first-person combat. There is some crafting, some inventory management, like in Resident Evil 4, if you like playing Tetris with boxes of medicine and scalpels. And then there's a day-night cycle. It's real time. Time passes. So, given that it's a survival game, you have all these different meters that are playing off of each other. And so, if you eat salted fish, you're going to get thirsty. But if you're thirsty, that means that you aren't able to run as far. And if you aren't able to run as far, that means you can't get to places on time, or you have to end the day early, and so on. So there's this tension and interplay between these different systems. Now, I haven't said what the story of the game is at all, or the setting. So you play a surgeon returning to your hometown, and it's a very weird town, very surreal. There's a whole talk I could give on, just the architecture of the town, or the different themes of capitalism and colonialization and racism and so on. But I'll set all that aside for today, because the main motivation for the gameplay and the story is that in this town, a plague breaks out. But that's okay because you're a doctor, right? Only it's pretty bad to be a doctor when a plague breaks out and no one will listen to your medical advice and they want you to do the impossible. And, the townsfolk might hate you. The administration might not listen to you. So it's kind of, it's tough out there for a doctor during a plague. So you have to go around and treat the sick. And, given that this is an RPG, you have all of these characters with these big, interesting dialogue trees and interesting quests that you want to do. The only problem is that all of the characters can easily die. They can get sick. They can get killed. There's really no shortage of ways that these people are going to get themselves killed, which is very unfortunate because you're a doctor. You want to take care of them. So there's a tension of keeping yourself alive with keeping these characters alive. So as you're going through the world, you're trying to take care of them while also trying to balance your own meters, right? Trying to make sure that you have enough food to eat in the day. You're going around and you're gathering supplies. You're rummaging through trash bins for empty bottles so that you can brew medicine at your base and then bring that to people. You're collecting marbles off the ground so that you can trade them with children who will maybe trade you needles so that you can patch up people who are wounded, and so on and so on. So you're balancing these priorities, but also you're balancing time, right? So like any RPG, you have, these characters and they give you quests. But if someone says to go and meet you at the park at sundown, and you're busy on the other side of town, rummaging through trash, trying to find something to eat, or you are running around trying to administer enough medicine to people before they, pass out and potentially die, you might just miss out on that opportunity. You might not get there in time, which means that you are just balancing all of these things, and it's constantly oppressing you. But because you are constantly being oppressed by all of the terrible, symptoms of being a doctor during a pandemic, you come to really depend and rely on the townfolk. And you go ahead and you trade with them, you trade items. So, this character right here, she's got some marbles that she'll trade for immunity boosters or for soap or bandages, right? Which I think is a really interesting just narrative storytelling thing. But you start to realize like something about these different characters, who they are, what they need, what their priorities are. And you come to empathize with them because you are affected by the same systems that they are. When characters do things and it's clear that their motivation for doing it is out of hunger or fear of getting sick and dying, you have a real intimate experience with that because you know what that's like yourself. You understand what it is to be starving at midnight when all of the stores are closed and you can't find bread anywhere. You understand what it's like to be, on your last legs, exhausted, fighting off a plague, trying to get home so you can take some morphine, go to sleep, and wake up at least in a little less pain. So all of this is to say that you understand how systems coerce you, and you understand how the systems coerce other people, which again, back to the empathy point, even systems that don't affect you personally, you at least understand why they affect other people. So there is a group of people in the game that are sort of social outcasts, social lepers that are not allowed to trade with people in the town. And that gives you a tremendous amount of sympathy for them because you understand how devastating that would be in a personal way. So even though you aren't confronted with that oppression, you at least have enough experience that you can understand why that would affect somebody. And then, of course, here you've got some bandits, who are going around robbing people at night, looting abandoned houses, and knifing anyone in sight. Which normally in, video game thinking, these guys are just the bad guys. Like, you hate these guys. They make your job harder. They're difficult to fight. You want to run away from them. You want to sneak around. But what's interesting is that the system coerces you into actually doing those same things. Like, if I could get the drop on one of these guys and I was starving, or I was worried about having enough items to trade for medicine the next day, I might take out the knife. I might actually threaten their life and do the same thing that normally as a player you would kind of be cursing them for doing. So that leads to this interesting aspect where gameplay actually becomes moral. I don't think this is the only game that has done this by any means, but you pack your bag for the day thinking of other characters. You think about, okay, who do I know is sick? Who do I know is in need of medicine? Who do I know that has food to trade? And so on. And you're balancing these types of priorities. You're thinking about, well, do I really need enough medicine to take care of everybody today? Or would I be fine, if that union busting guy, well, maybe he doesn't need to get taken care of today. Maybe I can use that opportunity to actually create some more medicine to take care of the orphan kids in town. And then you choose who lives and who dies by the routes that you take. So even navigating this open world, this three-dimensional space, actually becomes a moral activity, which I think is really interesting. It's something I haven't experienced before. Like, I don't plan my routes and decide, do I go down an alley or down, the main street based on how that's going to affect other people's lives. And then, of course, there's not enough medicine for everybody. So you're tasked with taking care of all these people. But unless you are really, really good at the game, you are going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to gamble with people's lives on who needs medicine the most, whose life matters the most to you. And there's a lot of different axes for this, right? How much do you like that person? How much has that person helped you? How much do you think that they could help you in the future? What's their role in the town and in society? All that means that you are gonna die in this game. It is pretty brutally difficult. You will die multiple times, not quite so much as you do in Dark Souls, but still a lot. And this is, I think, the final thing the game does with its mechanics that's just really interesting, is when you die, you go back to a previous save state, like you would in any game, really. Only there is no recovery. Your meters are actually permanently reduced. You have less health. You get hungrier quicker. You don't rest as much at night, which makes the game actually more difficult. So when you die, it gets harder to beat the game, which is maybe thought of in this sort of like punishment way. But I think what's really interesting about it is that it makes it so it's actually possible to permanently fail, which means that the stakes when you're playing this game, and this is a RPG, this is 20 to 30 hours, the stakes are actually real. The player is betting the only thing that they have to put on the line, which creates a really powerful experience. When you're risking your own well-being, you aren't just risking your personal time. You aren't saying, oh, well, maybe this won't work, but that's fine because I'll just reload to an earlier save state and I know that I can't do that. You're actually risking your ability to beat the game at all, to save anybody in the world, to reach any type of conclusion. And that means that when you have those moments where you're actually playing the game and you're like, yes, it's actually worth risking this. I would be willing to never finish this game to make sure that this character is safe, to make sure that I take care of these people. That is something really interesting that I haven't experienced in a systemic type of way before. So you might ask, why is the game doing this to you? And this character right here, his name is Mark Immortel. He's the worst person in the entire universe. He's the one that punishes you every time you die. You really come to hate him. But he goes and he explains something about why the game is like this. And the idea is kind of utopian. It goes back into kind of a theater of cruelty, a very early 20th century modernist idea of the role of theater in society and human life. But the game is clearly trying to teach you something about what it means to be human, what it means to sacrifice and to risk things. That, again, I think is just really audacious and brave for a game to even try. I won't go ahead and spoil, some of the reasons that he gives for it, but they're there. So why play this misery simulator during an actual pandemic? And that led me to a question like, why do we play at all? And I don't think it's for escapism, because clearly if I was playing this, it's not to escape the real pandemic that actually exists in the world. So I kind of thought about, why do we play games at all? And of course, this is an old idea that games let us practice and experience things in a safe environment. So here on the left, you have my dogs fighting. This isn't as vicious as they get, but it's still kind of scary. I wouldn't want to be around those teeth. And then, of course, we have, kendo fighters over here whacking on each other with these sticks. And it occurred to me that a lot of play is actually about death. And it's about being able to play with this thing that you in real life, you obviously can't play with. So then that led me to a larger question, like, why am I doing this to myself? In a time where the world is not so great and where my personal life has gone through a lot of really unbearable tragedy, like, why would I subject myself to more of it? Why would I have any interest in this game at all? And so I started thinking about tragedy. And I think there are 3 reasons that we are interested in tragedy as human beings. One of them is that they offer some type of explanations. And these are screenshots from a show called The Wire, which is about the war on drugs in Baltimore. I strongly recommend it. I'm not the first person. But the creator of the show said that the stuff that spoke to me is the Greek drama, in which fated and doomed protagonists are confronted by a system which is indifferent to their heroism, to their individuality, and their morality. And I think Pathologic does this with its systems. It doesn't care that you want to be a good person. You are pushed into doing things that you know are morally wrong. It doesn't care that you want to be a hero. It actually asks you to actually make the decisions that a hero has to make. It actually asks you to pay the price of heroism. The other aspect of tragedy is this idea of bearing witness. I mean, I know the world is very bad right now, but I still think it's important to just note and be aware of the fact that bad things happen, right? And to remind ourselves of that so we can be grateful for the things we have. We can be aware of the things that we are capable of losing. Which brings me to a quote from Northrop Frye, a literary critic, who says that the historian tells us what happened, but the poet tells us the type of thing that always happens. And again, I think this is what systems do, right? You look at the configuration of a system and you see, given this setup, these are the choices that people will inevitably have to make, and these are their consequences. And then the final thing is it shows you how to carry yourself. And I think not just in a moralistic way, but just in an aesthetic sensibility of seeing people go through tragedy and how you can handle tragedy and how other people in history or the imagination have handled tragedy. Which brings me to a final quote from Northrop Frye about the play King Lear by Shakespeare. It says, "Whatever his actual size, Lear is a giant figure, but his gigantic dimensions are now not those of a king or a hero. They are those of a human being who suffers, but understands his affinity with others who suffer." And Pathologic 2 has made me feel that in a way that no other game has, in a way that I would have hoped was possible, but not been able to prove to myself that was possible through video games. You really do feel like you are part of a whole, an organism, a community, and a society. And you recognize your place in that, but you also recognize the larger structure itself. So yeah, that was me. I'll be around on Discord if anyone wants to talk about some of the things I said or anything else at all. Thank you for your time.
Man, it's awesome to see a talk on just like catharsis generally. Like, that was awesome. That's good. I need to play that game very badly. Thank you for not spoiling too much.
Yeah, yes, I would recommend that game. Everyone should go play it.
Oh, so good. All right, so next in order, we got Summer, who is a real dragon, I promise. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, let me change myself from push to talk, and I will get started. Give me 1 second.
I want to take a second to acknowledge your hat.
It's a very good hat. I like it. It's the first day of October. It's the spooky month. All right, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. All right. Hi, guys. I am Summer Tomaseski. I have been around the DSOP space. I've been an organizer for 7 years. I have been programming professionally for about 11, and I've been making games for close to amount that. And tonight I kind of want to give a quick pep talk. We have a lot of new members here. We have some old members here, and I want to really give people the tools to make something, to create something, the passion that drives us, the problems that get in the way, those sort of things. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There we are. Is a bit of an appetizer for this talk is there is no replacement for hard work at all. There's no God-given talent. It might exist, but I don't think it people say it exists, but I don't actually think it does. I think it's just hard work and passion and the ability to remove things from your schedule so you can continue working on your craft. Case in point, I have a deep respect for Stephen King and his work ethic. In his book on writing, the man locks himself out in a shed behind his house for like 6 hours a day. He knows that he has to hit a page count every day or he will not leave. Every day, he's back there writing. I highly respect him, and I have absolutely taken his work ethic and worked it into my own. So, again, I'm Summer, and then for those who don't know me and what I do, I work on a game called Mercenary Lido, which has a wide variety of characters. It is a 2D action platformer set in a science fantasy world where I have a cast of like really endearing characters, a plot you'll care about, and one fluffy dragon that you can pet. That's Alma, and I love her so much. So I've been working on this game for a long time. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've I've really made a lot of mistakes. I've been working on this game for 8 years. Like I am the case study of like what went wrong. The long and short of it is I didn't have a schedule, and I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, we're past that. But I absolutely love doing this. But I think the thing I need to mention here is that I do most of the work on this game. I do the pixel art, I do the writing, I do the programming, I do just about every bit of it, except for a few things that I will talk about that I have learned to let go of and to allow others to help me with. So let's go to the next slide. So the purpose, kind of getting back on topic, is from a game dev viewpoint, everyone here has a flame in them of what it is, a flame that cries to you that you want to be an artist or a software developer. You want to get better at writing, or you really want to get into producing. And so what do you want from this life, and what do you want in your project? If you have one, what do you want to give to people? Because we are here, we are listening to this talk. Like, you're all here for a reason. You have that flame in you. So the long and short of it is, what is stopping you from achieving that if you have a flame that you can't quite, you're not comfortable in the room with it, right? So if I have to refer to it, I'll refer to saying, hey, you want to be a pixel artist, just trying to keep the thing simple. So there are some general questions that you could really ask yourself, like, what are you lacking, and what's in the way, and are you improving, and are your expectations realistic? I've kind of boiled it down into the stoppers. There are 3 of them. It is the passion, the schedule, and the fear. Edward did a fantastic job talking about fear and getting punched in the face that I will not even try to attempt to stop or even top that. But I'm hoping that I can speak at least to the other 2, because again, we are all here and we all want to get better at our craft, or we want to start our craft, or we want to like figure out, how do I make a game, or how do I do 3D art, like all of this, or in this case, how do I be a pixel artist? So this is where I get a little brazen. I'm just going to call everyone out right now. If you don't want to do it, you need to stop lying to yourself and just like drop it. Like, you'll be so much happier if you just realize that you don't like want to do it. Like, I'm never gonna get around to like making sounds or music. Like, I know I could if I wanted to, but like I have too much on my plate, and I'm not interested in that. I'm just not. So I'm not gonna do it. Okay. And by realizing I'm not gonna do it, I have all this free time now, because I'm not trying to like force myself to do something. You know, either you are the artist or you're a faker. Like, do you want to do it? You know, stop lying to yourself. And so these are all bad, right? And Stephen King really is the king. Like, yes, he's had bad books, but he doesn't let that stop him, because he's had great ones, because he's still out there running off of his flame. He has the passion to continue to do his craft. So the first question that I ask, calling everyone out, is that, do you want to learn the skill you want to obtain? My day job, I interview software developers, and I can tell very quickly that you don't like software. You ask me about code, and I will start gushing. I love code. I love the crazy things you can do in JavaScript. I ranted about it 2 days ago. I love JavaScript. I love talking about it. I love mentoring about it. And you could just tell from my voice that like I absolutely love doing what I do. And so, you know, hard question, but I'm calling to you. I'm asking, do you have the passion for the skill? Do you want to do it? Okay. This is, everyone who knows me for more than a couple of minutes knows that I'm big on scheduling. Attention is our scarcest resource. We live in a world today where social media demands our attention constantly. It is a Skinner box. They want us to check their apps every 3 seconds to make sure you're not missing out on something. Everything's notifying. Discord. It's, you know, grandma has pictures on Instagram. You need to go check it. You need to put that to the side, because there are so many hours in the day. And skipping ahead a little bit, you should really track your average day and figure out what's helping you and what's not. The famous rant that I like to give is on green squares, which is a source control way of saying I did something today. So if you look at the little image in the bottom, this is what I do. I have a day job. I'm somewhere off-site on a client site for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Then I come home. You know, I got chores, got stuff to do. But I have crafted into my schedule that I will sit down for at least 20 minutes and do something on my game. That is a rule. I will not allow myself to do anything else. There is something to be said here that I will speak about later concerning mental health, because you don't want to burn yourself out. But as a rule, I will do something every day. And for those who are keen-eyed, and they'll say, well, Summer, you don't have great green squares everywhere. And I'll be like, no. The gray squares is when I was drawing that day and didn't put it into source control, my dear Watson. So, and there's also a couple times where like I went on vacation and I had to deal with it. And I'm sorry, Tyler, if I ever got moody with you because I wasn't working on my game. I love you. The point is, I have forced my schedule to work for me. There's no excuse. It's a habit. I do it because I love it and because I've crafted my schedule to allow it. Weekends, holidays, anytime I could squeeze, I will squeeze it. Going back to the slides as I read them, you can't learn 15 skills at once. Just like pick one. Like don't try and do too much at once. Like focus on one thing. Like if you want to be like a pixel artist and you want to animate, you need to know how to like draw first. You need to know how to like draw in like Photoshop or Sprite or something. Like you need to walk before you can start running. Just kind of, schedule it. Make sure you're picking the right thing you wanna schedule. Make sure you're doing the thing that needs to be done. And lastly, we're starting to get into the fear, the other stopper. Embarrassment is the cost to entry. Spoilers, when you first start it, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to be like really bad at your skill, like really bad, like really, really bad. And that's okay. Like you have to suck at something to get better at it. And that's okay. We are absolutely our worst critics. We absolutely hate ourselves that we can't draw a cat like someone with millions of hours in Photoshop can draw a cat. We hate ourselves because we can't compare ourselves to that. That's not fair to yourself, and you need to stop. Like, you just need to understand that you're going to be bad at it, and that's okay. So, like, here's some pixel art that I did, like, I don't know, 8 years ago, and you're like, Summer, that's good. And I'm like, no, it's not. I can do better. Like, look at that Leto on the right. Her anatomy's all wrong. Like, what's wrong with me? The color theory is all over the place. The lines are terrible. It's a hot mess. I didn't know what I was doing. You're like, Summer, it's okay. I'm like, okay, here's my really bad stuff from, like, even before that, when I was just trying to learn how to use Photoshop and, like, this cheap tablet pen that I got from eBay for $30 and it barely worked, but I did it. Okay, I did the thing. And absolutely, you can hate yourself for this. Oh, it's trash. It's garbage. Oh, how dare I do this? But you need to pivot and look at this again anew with fresh eyes and realize you are doing the thing. You're doing it. Yeah, it's rough. There are problems. You know it. Everyone knows it. But you are doing the thing. And that is something that I want to implore onto you, is that you are trying, and that counts for something. Give yourself some credit. So, as time has gone by, kind of going into the passion time scheduling thing, there was a conflict that arose. This is my own in-game art. I have gotten to this point where I still know that I have problems, but I can still go, hey, this is pretty cool, right? Like, I'm happy with this. I know it's not like the best pixel art in like the age of mankind. That would be Metal Slug, which those artists were not made of this mortal coil. So I can't even compare myself to them because they're gods. So I'm okay with this. Could get better, but I understand color theory and anatomy and, staging and all of that. So I realized, though, if I started drawing bigger stuff than this is just a taste of what's to come. My art skills started capping out, and I realized that I didn't have time to get really, really good. So my art is on the left. The Leto portrait that you saw previously, Gilbert, and then Tabs, who are all characters in my game. They're very near and dear to me, and I tried my best to draw their portraits. On the left. On the right, you might see, oh, Summer got better. She scheduled the time. No, I cheated, and I pay Zach to do that for me. Because I realized that I didn't have enough time with the programming and the level design and everything else that goes into making a video game that I truly enjoy making. I could not hit the quality. So instead of hating myself, I just had to realize that at some point you have to kind of let go, and maybe you can ask for help. Again, I'm trying to do everything. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. I do want to implore that. If you need help, ask for it, or pay someone. They'll definitely help you if you pay them. So I did not draw this. Zach did. I have an older title screen that I drew that took me like a month to draw, and it was terrible, and I hated it. And then I paid Zach to do it, and Zach did it in like 8 days. And it looks amazing. Like, I turn heads when this is on a convention floor because he's so good, because that's what he does. He has put so much time and scheduled the time, and he has passion for it, and he's not afraid to try. He's gotten to this point where I'm willing to pay him for his time, which is, if you want to be a pixel artist like this, absolutely, just go talk to him. He'll chat your ear off, right? That's important, because I realized that I had to let go. Same thing for sound and music. I don't do sound and music for my game. I've tried making sounds, and they're terrible. I pay Shay. Shay makes my problems go away. I love him. I love both of my people. Because again, I am just a programmer. My day job, I'm a programmer. I'm like a really good wizard at programming and crafting code and doing all these things. And I've kind of like dabbled in art and pixel art and animations and all that. But just I knew my limits and I knew I needed to stop. So again, if you're trying to bite off more than you can chew, maybe it's okay for you to pay someone else to do it or just not do it. Just ideas that you can ask yourself. If you want to make a game by yourself, but you can only do A, B, and C, then just do A, B, and C. That's plenty. Like, we're indies, you know? Yeah, we're expected to do a lot, but I can't do everything. You are a fool to think that you can make a game completely by yourself in a vacuum. No, someone's going to tell you and give you an idea, or you read a book, or you watched a movie. Like, it's never in a vacuum. It's from other people, not just you. So, things that I've gotten better at is that while I'm a pixel artist, I finally started dabbling in animation, and I found out that I really love it. I love working on it. I work on it every day, like I said, and I've realized that I just like doing animation. I've started to learn like how to get better at it, like the principles of animation. I've watched like roughs, and I was able to churn this out in about a week and a half. It's about 13 frames, and I was really proud of it. This was 3 months ago, so now I'm looking at it. I'm like, wow, I could be a lot better because of some things that I learned. So I'm going to skip forward to a new animation that I'm working on right now. Again, pixel art. And I already know that this one is going to be better because of some things I've learned in the last 3 months of viewing other people, of trying it every day, of researching my talents. And yes, I know this looks good, but the animation completely falls apart if you just stare at his chest, guys. Like, just if you look at it, I didn't know what I was doing because I just blocked in with color. I actually didn't draw the rough lines, which I'm starting to do here. And I've learned that the hard way, that if I don't do the hard work now, it's not hard, it's the right way to do it. If I do things the right way now, I won't have a mess that I have here right now. Like, yeah, it looks great, it's pops, it's great, whatever. I know that there are problems with it, and that's okay. I am my worst critic, but if you show this to any Joe Blow on the street, they're like, wow, that's really cool. I'm like, take a compliment, it helps. So, next. So, really kind of coming back to one of the stoppers is don't be afraid to just start trying things. Do the thing because you want to. Again, like, if you want to be a pixel artist, just start today. Just start something. Start now. Draw on a napkin for all I care. Like, there's so many people that I talk to, they're like confused, they're concerned about like their tech stack and like their tools, and then they never start it. Like, they're just finding excuses. Don't use excuses. Just go get a napkin and start drawing if you want to. Don't let anyone stop you. Same for if you want to be an indie developer. Like, there seems to be like this like plague of like, oh, don't use Game Maker, that's trash. I'm like, no, Hotline Miami and Hyperlight Drifter remain in Game Maker, and so is Undertale, and they made a lot of money. Like, don't let people poo-poo you. Like, if Unity is like a weird unicycle bike on fire going downhill at very high speed, it's very difficult to learn. I didn't like it when I first started using it. That's okay. Like, just pick something that makes sense to you. Like, I drew pixel art in Photoshop for like 7 years. That's insane to most people. Worked for me. Who cares? My product was good. Anyway, no excuses. So, really, your scheduling to fail is kind of overcoming the stoppers, realizing what the stoppers are, and then mentally preparing yourself to get over those. And then, like, yeah, you're going to rate yourself against your peers. You're going to keep at it. You're going to keep pushing yourself, and that's fine. And really, just try and scare everyone again. You have to do the thing, or you are just going to die in obscurity. In 60 years, hopefully longer, I will be dead. And my legacy, yes, I'll have a kid with Tyler eventually, but my legacy is my product. I believe that. That's what drives me to push and to make something, to create something. And if I don't do the thing, if I let something, a meaningless stopper stop me from making my game, then I will die in obscurity because this game will never come out and no one will know about the great cast that I have. And that's sad. And that makes me very sad. I could cry. So, like, again, if you don't want to learn a new skill, like, go do something else. You'll be happier. Like, go do something else. That's okay. But for me, it's like, I got to get this game out because I got to get the sequel out. I'm already thinking about the sequel. Like, that's how much I love this. I'm driven. So, if you don't drop it, some quick tips. Ask for feedback. Look at resources. Do some continuous learning. Find inspiration. Ask your peers. Do the research. And really, the fastest way to improve is to get feedback. You leave your ego at the door and you present your product to someone and they say, hey, fix this, this, and this. You will learn that and then you will never make those mistakes again. Like, leave your ego at the door. You know, the harshest critic in the room is yourself. You are absolutely trying to get something out and you need to give yourself credit for that. Be fearless. Be fearless. And so this is the warm part of this pep talk. This is the good news. I've given you enough of bad news. I've scared all of you enough. eventually people will start to take notice. And that is why people say, oh, Summer's a great pixel artist. And I'm like, what? What? I'm a programmer for a day job, but I've gotten into pixel art because I enjoy it. I've started, I can give a talk about it now. People look at it, I can help them. That's the good news. People are like, hey, you're kind of decent. I'm like, cool. Like people will sit down at game conventions and play my game just because of the art. Yeah, Zachary's art's great, but I'm the one who has to pull the wagon and get the rest of the game there, right? Like they're looking at the stuff in game, which is both of ours, but it's also mine. I have to be aware of that. I have to get better at that. Take a compliment once in a while. You do deserve it. You need to. You need to be easy on yourself. And again, many people don't make it this far. Like they're idea guys. They're like, oh, I'm gonna get into this at some point, and then they never do. Like, oh, I would do it if my spouse would let me. And it's like, what? Like, why are you so full of excuses? Go do the thing you want to go do. Like, you have a flame in you. Go acknowledge it and feed it and kindle it and do something with it. But also, as Edward said earlier, don't burn yourself out. For all of the get good vibes that I have, I still have 165 hours in Animal Crossing. I love that game, but also because I know how my schedule works, I know that I can play Animal Crossing 20 minutes before I go to work. That's it. It's plenty. And maybe on weekends I play an extra hour and a half. That's fine. But when I'm not doing that, I know that my schedule has at least 20 minutes, and then I find that once I get my butt sat in the chair, those 20 minutes will turn into an hour and a half because I get sucked into some animation that I'm like, oh God, I can do this. This is gonna be so good. But if I don't, I just get up and go, you know what? I'll get it tomorrow. I'll get it the next day. As long as I get my green square, we're fine. That's how I push myself. But again, don't burn out. Don't go crying in the parking lot. Schedule some fun time. You got it. Mental health is real. It's real. Believe me. So, kind of wrapping up here is, again, people who are watching this video, what do you actually want? What do you actually want? Do you want to be a good pixel artist? Do you want to be a writer? What does it take to do that? And what is stopping you from doing that? And again, the 3 stoppers: the passion, you don't want to do it and you're lying to yourself. Your schedule, fix it. Fix your damn schedule that it works. Like, yes, I have a day job. My day job is not the reason I'm here talking. I've figured out my schedule to be here and talk and tell you how I made it work. Don't let time stop you. Make the time. Make the time for practice. Don't wait around. And then again, fear of embarrassment, the fear of someone laughing at you, the fear of, guys, I'm a mod for DSOP. If anyone's bullying anyone about someone trying, oh, you bet your ass I'm going to ban them with a nuclear fist. We don't have time for that. We need to let our people grow and get better. So don't ever let anyone belittle you, because that's toxic. That's a bad friend. That's a bad acquaintance. Don't set yourself up for people to tear at you. Criticism is good, but not oh, your art's shit. Oh Christ, don't ban them. They're trash. You deserve better than that. You deserve better. Thank you for listening to me rant. I'm done now. Go start getting green squares. Go get some green squares. Now.
Thank you, Summer. I was just about to smoke signal you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay, bye. I probably went over. That happens.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Summer. Moving on to the next person. We
Hey!
have, let's see here. I got to switch inputs really quick, so give me just a hot second. But next up, we got Richard Lowland. Richard actually was worried about their internet connection, so he went ahead and pre-recorded his video, and it's he wound up putting a lot of effort into it, so I'm pretty excited for this. Let me fix the Discord, though.
And this is our final talk, I believe.
This is our final talk.
Yeah, a lot of information for an hour. So I appreciate everybody watching out there on the live stream and in the chat. And then afterwards, we'll break into mingling and hanging out and talking and asking questions. We will create more rooms. Actually, I'll do that here in a minute. So you guys can break into individual topic rooms for each talk.
Am I tripping? Sorry, pardon me for a second. I am struggle bussing on this for a second.
Yeah.
There we go. It does not like it full screen for some reason. All right, there we go. And hopefully everyone can hear this. I can't hear it. That means no one can. There we go.
Hey everybody, my name is Richard, aka Lowland. In this conversation, we'll discuss 2 things. The first thing that we'll discuss in this microtalk is a way to add a cool artistic effect that adds a lot of visual texture to your game. And then the second thing is how to hack a camera in Unity or Godot to turn it into a light that runs really, really fast. If you're like me, you find that the DSOP feed it's one of the best discussions that you can subscribe to. This is my attempt to get back to the discussion, something that you might find interesting or useful.
Actually, I gave this to you for your wedding.
So let's get going. It's extremely exciting. A lot of experts have said to start a conversation with a story. It's not a strength of mine, but I'll give it a shot. The setting is wherever you are. The characters are two strangers, both disaffected by the realities of modern life. They each decide to take a trip to the art museum, still strangers at this point, and wander around for some inspiration. One work of art strikes them so profoundly that they literally run into each other. For the first time in their lives, they see themselves and they see each other. They fall in love, get married, find a great therapist, and live happily ever after. And it was all because of this one shared experience they had and the artist that created it. Of course, you don't just make art, you make games. They are interactive and have complicated machinery. They tell stories, so they're part theater. Before, the artist would use paintbrushes to put paint on a canvas. Now we use shaders to put pixels on a screen. And while the shaders themselves might not look like art, they play an important part of giving your audience an experience that can move them in a profound way. If you're looking for great art in a modern medium, you don't have to go very far at Society of Play. Just in our last jam, where everyone was using the same palette, each of the teams came up with some really diverse ways of creating texture and visual interest in their images. Of course, there were a lot of good projects, but these really stood out to me. I'm not gonna lie, I just wanted to loop the Groove in the Grove music for the rest of the presentation. Another way that is really popular to create texture in your images is through dithering. And this is something that Lucas Pope really keyed in on for the Return of the Obra Dinn. He wrote an amazing article or series of posts about the troubles he encountered while trying to dither. You'll see that there's a lot of noise in the texture, and he tried over 100 hours different ways of approaching it, from screen space dither to UV space, cube mapping, and then centerline spherical mapping. There's another option, which is screen toning. Maybe you want to channel your inner Andy Warhol. To me personally, this is one of my favorite ways of color mapping. We take your generic render output, map the values to a specific color block. All you have to do is measure the hue. This function gives you a value between 0 and 1, depending on what the input color is. The next step in the screen toning process is to turn the image black and white. If you're doing it in Photoshop, relatively easy. There's a couple different models that you can use. But in this case, I'll use the simple one, which is luminance value, just the average between the maximum and the minimum RGB value. Then we'll linear burn, so we'll sample the screen tone and the black and white version of the image, and then subtract 1. This is what the output looks like when you do that. And then we'll also threshold the value so that it's a hard cutoff between black and white. Let's overlay that over the color blocks. Instead of using white, let's use the colors that correspond to the underlying base tones from the gradient. Then we'll repeat the process for the lower half of the luminance curve, and this is the result. And I know you're asking, like, how does it look in motion? Do we have the same problems with screen toning as we did with dithering? Lucky for you, we have a technical demo so you can see for yourself. This is the location. I'll also post it in the text chat. Here you can see what the screen toning process looks like when you're subjecting it to movement as Google Earth controls. Pan, zoom, rotate. The number of keys correspond to different phases of the screen toning process. If you press N for noise texture, you can see that doesn't work. L for linen, and then P for stripes. This is one that I really like. We'll go through the code later, but you can play around with this to see which ones, if any, that you think are good. It's distracting when you're moving the stripes up and down and the linen, but to me the screen tone is relatively direction agnostic, so it works in pretty much most directions, and it creates definitely a unique vibe. For the right project, this could really bring it over the top. Now you have seen the general process, we'll dig into what's happening when the image is moving and why some of these work and some of these don't. So you could say that the noise being worse than the screen tone is subjective, but these things are distracting for everyone, so it's not just you, and it's all a function of how the human cortex does mapping. Basically, that First layer of your brain is laid out exactly like your retinas. And then each successive layer performs primarily XOR or exclusive OR operations, and the signal is aggregated by what the medical peeps call complex cells, which reach out and connect to multiple groups of base layer neurons like a tree. So the farther up you go, the larger an area each of the complex cells represents. Isn't layered quite as cleanly as a MIP map, but it functions in essentially the same way. Top layer, the lowest MIP, so to speak, feeds into your 3D pathway that understands space. That's why when you're looking at the Oberdin visuals or this image, even when there's noise, you understand the spatial relationship, so you can see the spheres moving around. But there's also a part of it that's distracting, and that's because the focia, the zero level of the MIPS, the center of your vision, feeds into your 2D pathway, which is constantly scanning for symbols and faces. The screen tone is repeating a symmetrical pattern, so it doesn't get too far into your temporal lobe. That's the 2D pathway before it loses interest, so it's not creating a whole lot of conflict. The noise, though, is irregular, so it takes a lot more work for your brain to figure out that the pattern isn't important and doesn't have any symbolic meaning. When it's high contrast, the dots are jumping all over the screen, but if it's continuous, the dots are staying generally in the same location, they're just getting bigger and smaller. There's some distraction, but it's really a small amount, and the distraction might actually be good for creating something that people notice. That's why the continuous SDF is important, whatever pattern you use, so that it has to be a smooth gradient, but it could take any real shape that you want. I know what you're saying, let's just get to the code, okay? Let's make some paintbrushes. All we need to do is turn the process that we described earlier into code as a post-processing effect. In Godot, we just write a canvas shader that does exactly what we discussed. First thing we're going to do is sample the render output color. The majority of the logic is wrapped into this function. First step is to find out which gradient this specific pixel is on. If it has a low level of saturation, pretty close to white or pretty close to black, then we'll just assume that's a neutral tone. Find the hue, map each hue to a base color, then go back to the original image, find the luminosity, sample the screen tone, and then we'll combine those two values using the linear burn formula we discussed earlier. Add the two together, subtract 1, output 1 or 0, and then use that 1 or 0 to blend between the base color and either the highlight or the dark tone, depending on whether you're on the bright side or the dark side of the spectrum. Add that to viewport and you're done. Super, super easy. Of course, there's only a couple people that are using Godot, yeah, whatever here. Just as easy to do in Unity. The way that I learned how to do it, because I've never done it before, Google custom post-process effect, skip all the words, copy the shader and the C# file in gray into your project, give it some renames. All of the work that we do on a post-processing effect doesn't have a vertex shader, so it's a lot easier. It's basically just color in, color out, and then anything that happens in between is up to you. So all of our work is going to go here inside the template. The code for Unity high-level shader language is almost exactly the same as Godot with a few syntactical changes. I also had a problem is that I couldn't get any of the colors, the RGB values, to be anything than the red snapper palette. It's almost as if the RGB values are hard-coded into the shader. So that's kind of weird, but if you take a look at the code, maybe you can figure out how to take the shader parameters that come out of the engine and plug them into the shader. I'll share this project. We've got a post for the technical demo if you want to take a look at it. We're running out of time, so I'll just run through the shadows really quickly. This next one is a little more complicated, but you might find it interesting, and there might be a use case, particularly in low-spec mobile. The idea came from a palette jam earlier this year, where we had to use the Seachem palette, like the French version of NTSC, that has cool French names like blue French rose and chartreuse. The idea was to use additive lighting instead of subtractive or multiplied. So basically that's all white materials with colored lights to create the palette. But in Unity, a simple scene with just 3 directional lights and the engine struggled at 4K. Looked into it a little bit, and the reason is that the shaders are doing a lot of work to see whether a pixel is in light or not. A directional light is just an orthogonal camera with a depth buffer only, no color output. It renders all the geometry with replacement shaders to the depth buffer in a pre-pass, and then that's just the beginning. Then once you get to the actual render pass, each pixel has to get converted into world space, has to inverse transform mat4 by vec4 into directional light buffer space, does a little math, and then sample the buffer to see whether or not the pixel is in front of or behind the closest object that the light camera can see. Then we repeat the process 3840 by 2160 times, or 8.3 million times per frame, which is 500,000 times per second, times 3 directional lights, 1.5 billion texture lookups per second, which we're going to have to do anyway, but it's also an extra 83 billion instructions that the GPU has to handle. It's a new busted notebook and mobile GPUs. There is an easier way. Processes like this, you take your camera, assign the output to a render texture, use that render texture as a material, so it looks like this. There's only 4 corners on this plane, which are 6 vertices that are transformed into a shader, which is a lot less than 8.2 million. All we need to do is rectify the matrix so the 4 corners of the camera output line up with the 4 corners of the plane. We don't have time to go through all the process of deriving the linear algebra, but the output or the solution is pretty simple. It just reads the Y and X angle from your camera, aka light. Here's the replacement shader for the material. If the object shows up, make the pixel black, and that's all there is to it. Then in the composite shader, read as many directional cameras as you have, add them together, and you're done. So the code for the compositing is extremely simple, and you compare that to the 1.5 billion texture lookups we were doing for the non-planar shadows, and you can see why this is a lot faster. For most people, this is 3 logical leaps, so I don't expect anyone to use it, but if you're interested in doing this for whatever reason, yeah, just hit me up on Discord and I can walk you through it. So, in sum, we discussed a lovely, completely not made up story about why we do this stuff in the first place, which is to give people a chance to experience they couldn't otherwise. And then while games involve a lot more than just graphics, the arts is a way of getting people's attention, and shaders are but one tool that help us get there. We discussed a Screentone shader approach, which is extremely easy, and also how to do general post-processing effects in Unity, which is a lot easier than it sounds. We discussed using cameras as directional lights. It's a little more complicated, probably not as useful, but interesting nonetheless. And now the presentation is over, so you can get some even more awesome ideas from our next guest. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Cool. Let me get back to this. But thank you, Richard. That's it for today. Let me get back to sharing my screen real quick, though, in Discord for everyone. So we do these MicroTalks every single year, or every quarter, actually. So if you enjoyed this and you want to give one next time, then just go out of your way to, or we always post them every quarter, and we'll post in the Discord. So if you're interested in giving a MicroTalk in the future, join our Discord and keep an eye out on the announcements. But also, we're going to be doing Q&A if anyone wants to talk about these talks or just, shoot the shit and hang out. We'll be on our Discord hanging out. Other than that, I just got a couple things before we wrap up really quick. Thank you to our patrons. We're able to do a lot of this. Like I said earlier, we got the Game Jam coming up. We were able to commission that amazing piece of art from Zach, which is actually Summer's artist. You can ask her more about him. And we're able to commission art like that for this awesome Game Jam coming up, thanks to our patrons. So thank you so much for supporting us. And we'll see y'all in Discord, and we'll see y'all during the Game Jam in a couple weeks. Talk to y'all soon.
Word. Awesome. Do us all a favor and pop into the mingle rooms individually at first to give people a chance to hunt you down and ask you questions. And then you guys can, after a few rounds of questions, making sure everyone got the questions in that they wanted, you guys can begin asking each other questions if you'd like. But it'd be nice to separate you guys off immediately.
But yeah,
just for a little bit.
Because I was number 3, so I'll go into 3.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
But yeah, we'll see y'all in the chat rooms. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. And we went a little long, so thank you for your patience. But talk to y'all soon.